everybody. Welcome back to the Boss Hole Chronicles. I'm Sara Best, your co-host. John, my partner in crime, is from a big conference on the West Coast. So I'm solo today, but it's a great subject matter expert. Today, we're going to be talking about the other B word, not boss hole, but burnout. And joining us today will be Dr. Michael Leiter. He's basically a trailblazer when it comes to studying and designing cures and resolutions for burnout. But he's a researcher and a writer on psychology. He is an organizational psychologist. He focuses on burnout, work engagements, and social relationships at work. His most recent work is, I would say, is a book co-authored with Dr. Christina Maslach called The Burnout Challenge. And in the Burnout Challenge, they together identify 6 core areas or mismatches that contribute to burnout. And burnout's been around for a long time, but it has a different face today following the pandemic. So I think you're going to really enjoy and benefit from the conversation here. Let's dig in.
The Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
Dr. Leiter, it is truly a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for your time.
Well, it's excellent to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about these ideas.
In preparation for our conversation today, I was thinking about, we have a B word, boss hole or bad boss, but there's another B that we need to be paying attention to, and leaders need to be understanding and addressing, and that's burnout. And you are absolutely a pioneer, a deep researcher. You're an organizational psychologist who's devoted much of his career to helping address and identify the issue of burnout, which the World Health Organization in 2019 declared a workplace phenomenon. I know you can tell us more about that. What got you interested in burnout and this concept of lack of employee well-being?
What got me interested, I was doing some work, more like clinical psychology work, with a residential mental health facility back in the 1980s. And I could see that there were the issues that the patients had dealing with their own struggles and crises, but there were a lot of issues that were occurring between various sectors of the professionals who were providing treatment to the patients, and that they had their own tensions and their own dramas. And they were such that people who had really devoted themselves to this profession of mental health care, whether in psychiatry or psychology or social work, nursing, the various professions, that some people, because of their experiences just dealing with the workplace, would have these crises such that they just wanted to leave. They just said, I'm going to turn my back on this thing I've put so much of my life into developing. And, but thinking particularly of a psychologist who left there to start a restaurant. And I was like, how do you get to that place? That's just, it seemed like more of this existential crisis of who am I in my work and how is it going to be functioning? And I read Christina Maslach and Susan Jackson's first article on job burnout. That was in the early 1980s in the Journal of Organizational Behavior. And I said, this is important stuff. This is very big ideas. They're capturing something here. So I just picked up the telephone and called California, called Christina Maslach at UC Berkeley, and said, hi, I'd like to come work with you for a year on this and see what we can do. And so I went out to the West Coast, spent a year there. We worked on this, wrote some stuff together, and we've been writing articles and books together ever since then. So it's the thing about burnout, it's a really interesting issue. It's also a problem that doesn't go away fast. You can make a lifetime career trying to figure that thing out and trying to actually make a difference with it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously you began studying and understanding this decades ago. So even before the pandemic, burnout had challenging consequences for bottom lines and organizations, and first and foremost for people's well-being. So yes, it's not a new idea. I'm wondering if how burnout is experienced today. Well, I don't know if we're allowed to say post-pandemic, but we kind of are through the thick of it. Is it different today than it was when you first started looking at burnout?
Well, it's different and the same, I guess. I think fundamentally, the idea that the World Health Organization, as you mentioned, that it defined it as this occupational phenomenon, but it's a three-part syndrome of exhaustion combined with sort of cynicism, combined with a lack of efficacy, being really discouraged. So it's this three-part kind of a syndrome. And that quality, I think, has been fairly consistent throughout the time that we've been looking at this, that really defines the essence of this. But the ideas that people encounter, the crises that leads to experiencing those things, I think that has evolved quite a bit. That over the previous few decades, people have developed distinct ideas about what is work all about, what do I expect from work, what can work reasonably expect of me, and are those things aligned? Because we look at burnout as a relationship crisis. It's the relationship between me and the workplace, the person and the workplace. What's going on in between them? The sort of medical kind of idea tries to locate it within the person. The person has burnout, or it's in there. Something about the person has this quality of burnout. We go, well, sort of, but it's really the relationship between the person and the workplace is what's driving burnout. It needs a relationship solution because it's a relationship problem.
Okay, that's so profound, and it makes me think about articles I've read and approaches I've even attempted to use in the past, where we try to equip the individual with ways to treat the burnout. Do more yoga, take a meditation class, start writing in your journal, eat healthy foods, exercise, drink water. We kind of, it becomes this internal thing we try to fix in the person, but you're talking about a relationship solution. It's between the person and the workplace.
Yeah, because, right. I don't think people experience burnout because they haven't done enough yoga. I don't think that's really the driving force.
Yes.
If only I'd done yoga this morning, I wouldn't have been burnt. No, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
But it's more the idea that people come into workplace with expectations. They have psychological motives, needs of wanting to belong, want to be part of a community. And that's a very reasonable thing to want for something you're going to spend hours of your day in and day out doing. There should be, because people are social critters. And so there needs to be a community that connects with people, or something's wrong with the connection. And they want to accomplish something. They want to have the experience of being effective, of having of somebody who's capable, and that there is that experience at work. It's something work really needs to be giving people. And also that idea of having an impact, of autonomy, whether it's that, but just really feeling at some of the times that you're the one that's making stuff happen, rather than always being the one that others are making happen. Right. And so that kind of initiative, all those things, those kinds of psychological needs, motives, aspirations that people are bringing to work, if they're running into a workplace that doesn't respond to those things, that's a relationship problem. It's totally reasonable for people to have aspirations, motives like that. That's very human. So that's something's wrong. And to say, well, you're being totally frustrated at work. Well, you should learn to live with it, in a way, is what you're saying. Just relax. Don't worry about your dreams for your career, or how you think people should treat you with respect, or anything like that. That's not, you should just relax,
Yes.
Have a cocktail.
Well, and
I don't know. That's not really the solution.
It's not. And I think what I've seen happen for people when they arrive at a place where there's not a fit is they start to doubt themselves. They start to internalize and say, something must be wrong with me.
Yeah, if you're in an impossible situation, you either change the situation or
Mm-hmm.
you change yourself or the both together, the relationship between the two, or you leave.
Yes.
Like that's
Yeah.
basically your
Oh,
options. And so people often go, well, it's me, I'll just change me, which means you're going to let go of things that you really cared about
right.
or aspired to or had the potential for,
Yeah.
and say, no, I guess it's not going to happen here. And that's can be really sad to let go of things like that.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. I think what you're talking about is how I was first introduced to you. The Harvard Business Review published an article that you co-authored with Dr. Maslach that's titled "To Curb Burnout: Design Jobs to Better Match Employees' Needs." And come to find out, this article kind of touches upon, it's a segue into a great book that you co-authored with Dr. Maslach about burnout. Hopefully we'll get to talk about both. You've defined burnout for us. It's cynicism, exhaustion, and you even quoted the word inefficiency in one of your articles.
Mm-hmm.
It's the state that people arrive at. So in the Harvard Business Review article, you kind of give leaders some guidance around how to better match employees' jobs with employees' needs. Can you share with us a little bit about your insights there?
Right. Well, I think that a part of it is, thinking about those psychological needs, those aspirations. That people want to belong, having a community where people are experiencing respect is part of that's a manager's basic task, is to make sure that's a quality of the work environment that people are in, and particularly if there are things happening on the negative side, that is a challenge that really needs to be dealt with. So that kind of, and that people, they need to feel appreciated. They want to have their accomplishments and contributions acknowledged, not just by the boss, but us develop a community there where people are, supportive of each other in that kind of way,
Mm-hmm.
and opportunities for initiatives. So there are those basic needs, and then there is also, values that people bring. Whether it's pertaining to the natural environment, is pertaining to looking after people, dealing with inequalities and trying to resolve some of those tensions in the world. But there's things that people want to bring to their work with healthcare providers. They have aspirations about healing people, of making people feel better. They're not just trying to put in a day at the job. They're
Right.
trying to actually have an impact in that way, and in a certain way that has a therapeutic relationship that they're able to build on. And so recognizing that people have those qualities and seeing as a manager, a leader at the workplace, that part of your function is to develop the environment so that people can have more of those experiences. And to the
Yeah.
extent that they're frustrated in trying to get to those experiences, you've got something that they're going to be pushed towards the burnout end and away from the end of being really engaged with their work.
Well, and speaking of engagement, I think we also understand that globally, about 80% of employees are disengaged. So we know in our country, the numbers, hit a 9-year low, and employee engagement is what, like 32% now, at least according to Gallup, and their great research around that. So to move toward deeper engagement, what you offer managers and leaders and supervisors is a way to generate more of a fit. I love, you talk about these briefly in the article, but you outline them much more specifically in your book called The Burnout Challenge. And when was that published? Just recently?
It came out November.
Yeah.
22.
This is one that every leader, every listener in the Boss Hole Transformation Nation needs to put on their bookshelf after they review it top to bottom. It's powerful. I think the 6 items: workload, control, reward, community, fairness, values, they do encompass, and you really go into great detail about each of these. Is there one that kind of stands out more in a particular industry over another? Or is there one of these 6 areas, regardless of what industry a person works for, these core areas that seems to be more weighted more heavily or more significant?
It's very much sort of depends on the situation, which is why, I think it always is important to be doing like assessments, doing surveys, doing whatever, talking to
Yes.
people. And with those 6 areas in mind, with the burnout scale in mind, we work with a company called Mind Garden that does those kinds of surveys on large organizations. The thing is, and what you find, I guess there's 2 things. One is that uh, different settings, depending on the nature of the work and the history of of that work group, is going to have different parts of that are going to be really important. Some of them, it's really all of it. It's about reward and appreciation. And for others, it's workload. The hours are too long. It's interfering with their personal life. But for another, it's about community and that we're just not getting along well with each other. And I can't stand going on and being with these people that don't like me and I don't like them. That's really their big issue.
Right.
So that is one. But the other part is, all of these things to some degree are related to the experience, whether people are going to be on the engaged or burnout side of the equation. And it isn't always that you have to work with the most powerful, the strongest, the thing with the strongest relationship with burnout. The main thing is to figure out, it's got a relationship to burnout. What do I have any control over? What can I actually change? Because too often, I think organizations go in and do these big employee surveys, and they raise these expectations that they're going to do something, and they're not ready to do what needs to be done. So they've really got to think about, before you even ask the question, introduce the topic, put it on the table. You've got to go, am I actually going to do anything about this?
Yeah.
Or
is this the right time?
am I just goofing around here? Or are you actually going to change something fundamental about how people work? Not just, the color of the curtains on the windows. It's got to be change the nature. Here's the thing this morning, just this very day. So the guy who does accounting for my business, he gives me a call and he says, okay, we want to change your business so that its financial year ends in August. And I said, okay, well, why? He said, because everything's ending at the calendar year and it's all going at the same time as the personal income taxes. And we're getting overwhelmed at tax season. And we need to spread it out across the year. And he said, where this idea came from? I said, no. He said, I read your book. And that idea of managing workload so that it doesn't pile up on people too much. And I said, that's a good idea. Our pile up is tax season.
Yes.
And if we can't do anything about personal taxes, they're all on the calendar year. Right. But businesses can declare a tax year that's different. So we're taking all the businesses that we work with and changing their tax year so it doesn't pile up at the same time as the personal taxes. And then we'll have a more reasonable pace going on here. And I think fewer people are going to get burned out from tax season. And I went, oh, okay. I hadn't thought of that when I was writing the book, but it's that kind of change, that something about the workplace that really makes a difference to people. And it's something you can change. That's what you got to, what are we willing to change here?
Well, and it requires a little innovation, a little thinking outside the box. I love that real life example. I think it's something we can probably all relate to, and it doesn't cause you much inconvenience, does it? I mean, does it bother you at all?
No, not a bit. No.
And it probably increases the accuracy of the data they provide for you.
Yeah. Errors increase when people are under pressure, and it's So I think all around, it's one of those win-win kinds of situations. So that's the kind of thing of finding out, what can we change about people's connection with work? And that's why I've done a lot with this sort of workplace civility. We have sort of a whole little framework that's a 5-session kind of an intervention that's like we call it doing family therapy with work groups. And it's just going in and saying,
needed.
We are stuck. We're not getting we're not really being the kind of team we want to be. And okay, let's start going in. Let's talk about civility. Let's talk about incivility and rudeness. Let's talk about what we can do. Let's practice new kinds of behaviors. So we're doing things differently with each other. And that if you increase that whole proportion of the good stuff, really pleasant interactions, to the disrespect, the people move away from burnout. They get more engaged.
Well, I feel like that's saving lives, to be honest.
Right.
And I love that addressing the places where people are stuck or relationships are stuck. I mean, let's face it, any work we're doing involves our humanness, our humanity, and
Yes.
we all need some help. I think navigating differences of personal style, preferences, baggage, all the things that we,
Yes.
we're amazing people, but we're also messy and fallible and challenging. And I love the intersection of civility into this work that you do around addressing the relationship people have to their work and addressing burnout. Because I would imagine that cynicism and that negativity that's born out of burnout can absolutely manifest as incivility. Is that what you found in your research?
Oh yeah, it's right. It goes in both directions. That people who experience more, rudeness from coworkers or their supervisor are more exhausted and more cynical, and then they behave more badly towards other people because when you're exhausted and cynical, it's hard to be really sweet.
Yes.
And in fact, you could be actually pretty grumpy and actually offensive. And so they get stuck, and then they get more cynical and more exhausted. It just and then they stay awake at night and ruminate over these things. And it's once it gets going, it's got a lot of power. So taking action that interrupts cycles like that is a very powerful thing to do, because you got to build in something that's going to carry itself over time, that's going to give people tools for solving new problems, because you don't get happily ever after. You just get a new way of maintaining something functional.
All right, we'll be right back.
With employee disengagement at its highest level in 9 years, your company can't afford to miss the mark when it comes to optimizing your hiring, management, and team performance practices. At its lowest level, employee turnover costs you $11,000 per person. And those are dollars you can easily save with the right set of people analytics. Real Good Ventures is a talent optimization consultancy specializing in world-class analytics specific to your people and the critical role they play within your organization. Gain confidence in your hiring practices, keep the boss holes from driving your talent away, design your teams for flawless execution, and create a culture that offers meaning and fulfillment. Real Good Ventures has a family of validated diagnostic tools specific to the human aspect of business, because we know that all business issues are people issues. Visit us today at www.realgoodventures.com and bring meaning and fulfillment back into your workplace.
Okay, let's get back to the program. Can I just step back for a second to what you were talking about when companies and organizations do surveys? They kind of like, hey, let's get some information, but they haven't really thoughtfully considered, are we willing to hear the information? Are we able to address it? Are we at a point in time where we can actually do something about that? This is the work you do. You help design surveys. You help large healthcare organizations and other kinds of organizations gather this information in a proficient way. Do you also help them design how they might address some of those issues that emerge?
Yeah, we definitely work with that. Yeah, that process of rolling out, how do we do the feedback process, and how do we start setting up a framework for taking action, which can range from, we have some things just focusing on quick wins. What have we learned from the survey, particularly from the written comments that people have added? It says, if we just, that's a little policy change, that if we made that one change, that's going to help people a lot and not really cost us very much. If we could do that quickly, it will look like, like a conversation, We asked them, they answered, and we said, oh, okay. And one example of that with a hospital we were looking at was that the first line managers were particularly irked. A number of them noted they were very irked because they had to do a whole rigmarole to approve when they wanted to approve somebody doing overtime. and they had to go up the chain, and it took a lot of paperwork and time, or paperwork or computer work. But anyway, it took a lot of forms and time in order to make this happen. And they're saying, everybody knows that we're understaffed. Like, we just simply don't have enough people now. And that's one of the big challenges for the whole operation, is that we're understaffed. We have to do overtime because we don't have enough people. Like, it's not like nobody's doing overtime just for fun here.
Right.
And it seems like they don't trust us to use our heads to deal with an obvious problem. So if they just took that away and said, managers, the first line managers, they have the authority to approve overtime when they say that's needed. Upper management can track that. They can see over time, how do we do with it? But to go through all this paperwork for something that's obvious and they have to approve it is just wasting time. And it's showing disrespect for our time, because we could be doing something much more worthwhile rather than filling out these forms night after night.
Right.
And so upper management said, well, duh, I guess we will.
Like, hit the easy button.
Sometimes you need a big message to come at you before you can really say, oh, that is something I didn't realize it was this many people who were really being pissed off about this.
To me, that harkens, to me, that goes along with, we hosted Aaron Dignan last year. Actually, he wrote a book called Brave New Work. And he talks about, the operating system that you have in your organization. One being kind of a stoplight mentality, which is let's, send the paperwork up the chain, wait for approval, then get the okay, then, let the person know they're working overtime. Or the roundabout, where you do trust people to use their heads and know the landscape and figure it out. It reduces the drag, it increases the efficiency, it increases the flow. That's a really good example of an operating system that says, let's get to the result and let's let people do what they do and do it well.
Let's assume people are competent until we, it comes in our face that, oh no, actually we got a problem here. But until then, let's pretend like they're competent and go with it.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay. So I'd love to segue to the book, The Burnout Challenge, Managing People's Relationships with Their Jobs. I think that what first attracted me to the title of your article and the book, actually, in the work we do, we talk about job fit being probably one of the number one reasons why people are not engaged. But for a slightly different reason than you do, we talk about people being able to utilize their natural behavioral drives. And to measure that, we use something called the predictive index. You actually were kind enough to take the PI. You're a promoter in the world of predictive index. There are 17 different profiles. Okay. But what that really means is, if I were to hire you onto my team or into my organization, I'd want to create an environment that met the needs of your natural behavioral drives. So as I read, further into the article and understood the book, you're really talking about matches or mismatches, those core areas. You've also called them mismatches, and I think it's very consistent with this idea of the individual, fitting the individual to the scope and the kind of work they need to do. So it makes me wonder, Michael, if we have these 6 key areas and they're all equally important. I don't know if I outlined them earlier. Matching or necessary areas are workload, control, reward, community, fairness, and values. We know that each individual may not need matches in all those areas, but if we're working to create environments and matches in those areas, generally we're going to help everybody. Would that be safe to say?
Yeah. Yes, that would be safe to say.
We've talked a little bit about workload. We can assume that control, autonomy was the example of, can we just give people authority to assign overtime? I would love to know about fairness. That one comes up a lot, although it's not really talked about. It's a sense, I think, that I see people have, that somehow they're not getting the same, or they're not, someone else isn't carrying their water, which could be workload. Tell me about fairness.
Well, fairness is a tough one. And generally, sort of its base level is sort of lower than the other 6 areas. Like, you're right, that people have a harder time being confident in fairness. Now, part of that is I guess within the perspective of the boss hole kind of framework, is that hierarchies are not good for trusting relationships.
Right.
Basically, when people are in a lower part of a hierarchical relationship, and work has these hierarchies. There's authority. Some people have more authority than others, and it's in some places it's a complete autocracy
Yes.
with how it's designed. And particularly when it is, the more it is an autocracy or perceived that way by people, they're going to assume that the boss is looking after the boss
Mm-hmm.
and not looking after me,
Mm-hmm.
certainly, and not even looking after the business all that much, that the boss is in it for the boss.
Right.
That is really an assumption that a lot of people carry into their basic perception of the workplace. And that there is this reality that people in upper management, when they're dealing with an organization, a big complex organization like a hospital or a school or a university, or or what they're concerned about, what is on their mind, is really different from what the frontline people are thinking about,
Yes.
and that's
true.
really necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, often people, I think, get carried away. Oh, they just care about money. They just care about money, and you go, well, they do care about money, but actually, that's their job. But
Mm-hmm.
at least part of their job is to care about money, and it's very nice if you've got a job where you don't have to care about money at all. You
Right.
just go to work. I don't have to worry about revenues or anything. I don't care. It all just works. Somebody's got to care about money. It doesn't
Yes.
just keep flowing. But it ends up, because there's this different priorities and people are not really understanding each other and dialogue with each other, then people get really separated, and they think there's people in management, they're up to something, and it's not what I'm up to, and they
Right.
don't really share my values. And you can get really into a corner with that kind of thing. And particularly if things are happening where you're feeling more and more cynical, and people, the experiences people have at work, things are not always fair.
Mm-mm.
Things are often unfair. And either you watch other people being treated unfairly, or you see yourself being treated when you see that's unfairly, then that really develops that cynicism. You feel like you're excluded from the community of things, from these powerful people who don't really see things your way. And it can become a really overwhelming part of a person's experience of a workplace. So I think fairness, that experience of being treated unfairly, is very heavy. And
Yeah.
it doesn't go away easily. People need a lot of evidence before they believe that it's really quite different from how they thought it was.
No, I love that you landed on that last comment, because I do think it takes, I don't want to say a lot of convincing, but it's something we need to open our eyes to, and it's very difficult to do so in organizations, especially in the dynamics that we currently live within. The dynamics have been present for centuries, but now they have a context, and there's a language to that, and diversity, equity, inclusive kinds of protocols and policies, and the divisiveness that comes around, and the fairness that I think people perceive there. It's very, very challenging. I kind of want to ask you, I'll put you on the spot if that's okay, Michael. Is there, you've shared a couple really good examples. Is there a great kind of a win story? Like, hey, there was an organization and they really uncovered an issue in this area, and they did this thing, and it made all the difference for people with burnout.
Again, we tend to work with small wins rather than huge organizational change.
Okay.
So, but I certainly see the small wins, and we talked about some of those, but also, again, where for me, the most hands-on stuff in that regard have been with these projects where we're improving workplace work group civility, that respect and civility among people in a work group, and really seeing how people are generally hungry for that kind of change. They really do want to be in a supportive work group. There are people who don't, like there are psychopaths amongst us or whatever, or people who just or just wanting to be the unpleasant part of any social group that they're in. And they tend to, when we start working on this, they tend to want to get transferred out into someplace else. They don't like to change all that much. But
Yes.
generally, most people are looking to improve the quality of these relationships. So it's really good to see people taking that on and then being able to track, those qualities of feeling exhausted, of feeling cynical. They don't go totally on the other end, but you get basically groups that are really clearly at a dysfunctional kind of level coming up to sort of a good moderate kind of level, or just a few months of working on these things and just changing. And then they've set up a way that's going to help them perpetuate that going into the future, where they have a lot of challenges that are going to be ahead of us on these things. And I think those are the kinds of things, because workplaces are, what we learned from the pandemic shutdown period was that work can change drastically, very quickly, if it has to. There's often these lines, we really can't change things here. We have to do it just exactly this way all the time. And then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, we just changed everything last week. It was all different now.
Yes.
And you go, oh yeah, well, we had to. Well, why don't we have to? When you've got so many people experiencing burnout, quitting their jobs, moving to someplace else, isn't that enough of an emergency to want to actually go in and change things for the better? So it's an interesting period now.
I love the way you package that. You did make the comment, Michael, about, sometimes when I'm certain that when you engage with a team, and what a great place to start. Let's start with our unit. Let's start with our team to increase respect, to increase trust, to create, civility and respect and trust on our team. That's oftentimes when the challenging individuals will self-select out, because it seems like otherwise they really don't. We have what we call learners, vacationers, and prisoners. I'm not exactly sure where that originated from. Also known as the 20-50-30 rule, that 20% of the team is pretty unflappable and amenable to change, and they like to contribute. They're the people that you wish you had 500 more of. They want to be causing the matter of impact, but they're humble and they accept you with grace. It's, they're just generally pretty amazing people. 20%, 50%, the vacationers, it kind of just depends on who they last talked to. They bring their mind, or they bring their body, and the mind sometimes engages or follows based on what they're hearing. So that, and they're also very coachable, and they want tools and they want to work together. That's 70% of a team. And there is unfortunately a larger amount. The 30% are the people, I think, who you just touched upon. For whatever reason, they're not capable of or not willing, to be different, to be different in the process, to adapt or adjust. And they have a to me mentality, not a by me mentality. Like that, this is, it's not something they're going to do. They're waiting for the solution to happen externally, but they tend to move out during a process like that. I want that to be an encouragement, what you said there, to anybody who's listening who is contemplating doing this kind of work and is hesitating because they don't exactly know what will happen. Well, that's one thing that will for sure happen, is the people who need it, the 70% who are waiting for you to create a healthier climate, are going to embrace it. And the ones who can't do that or won't do that, they'll go away probably, or you'll know you can manage them out effectively at that point. What do you say to that?
I think, I guess right. You're setting up a project that we're working on this together. And generally people the ones that don't want to change, they don't want to change because it's all working for them. And now if everybody else is changing, then whatever they had going isn't going to work for them anymore, because people are not being intimidated that readily. That people, part of what they do in these groups is that a group develops a protocol for when somebody treats you rudely, treats you with disrespect. What's going to be our protocol for responding to that, whether to ourselves or against somebody else? And now that's a very powerful thing for a group to say, this is how we're going to deal with this, and we're going to support each other through that, and it disrupts what other kind of power games people might have going.
Yeah, I'd say you're kind of in the business of saving lives. It just occurs to me as we're talking about all this stuff, how important it is. It really comes down to a person not only being fulfilled, but being healthy and fully operational and alive. And I think that's what's so special about the work you've devoted most of your career to. I would ask kind of in conclusion here, so we know people can get the book. By the way, listeners, in our show notes, there's going to be a wealth of information, numerous links that will take you directly to Dr. Leiter's work. It's abundant, and there's written works. You're also available to speak, correctly? So people could engage you on many levels to come and talk to leaders, to engage.
And we're developing workshops on these ideas as well. So like work group can do that, or a group of managers to make the most out of those ideas from the book.
I love this. So we'll have all that for our listeners to just easily access in the show notes. What is up next? Like, you live in Nova Scotia, you're doing amazing work all over the world, essentially. What's on the horizon for you?
Oh, what's on the horizon? Well, it's really partnering with organizations that want to really change things. That's basically my main focus now. I think we got enough ideas out there working. What I want to do is work with places that want to take on some serious, willing to change, take on this issue of burnout or work group incivility, take these things on seriously and work with us to make some serious change and to be able to write stories about that and to be able to share that and show this is how you undertake the process. Because too much people write too much about what causes burnout or what an individual can do to tolerate a bad situation, and there's not enough on how to actually change a work setting so that people are less vulnerable to these kinds of problems and are living a more fulfilled life. So that's what I'm looking at these days. That's what I want to write about and work on.
That's so great, and we'll focus on little wins. Not looking for a ginormous magic pill, wave a wand. These are small adjustments that can make dramatic impact on people's well-being and make them more engaged and less burned out. Well, I want to thank you, Michael, for your time today. Totally enriching, very timely information as well. Should an opportunity to talk again, would you be open to that? Could we meet up again sometime and maybe hear about the work you're doing and how it's advancing?
I would like that. I've really enjoyed today's conversation. So let's do more.
Okay, me too. And once again, thank you. And we'll see you next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles.
We'd like to thank our guest today on the Boss Hole Chronicles. And if you have a Boss Hole Chronicles story of your own, please email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Once again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you again soon.